Looks like we're live. I'm just going to share this out. Okay. Doing this as a live broadcast just to recap a few things. So we had a few technical difficulties last night, so I'm hoping that we can recap the content that I have taken offline, and we'll try and be a little bit more succinct anyway, so hopefully this will work out. And I probably won't be taking any questions, just for those of you that are tuning in, unless we kind of bundle it up towards the end there. We'll do questions at the end. So what I was trying to do was look at a couple of different things. Look at the overall strategic situation, sort of understanding where things are at from a historical perspective, number one. Number two, look at the scenario that we might play. And then number three, if we had time, it might make sense to do this as a separate video, have a look at the rules and kind of walk through the rules a little bit. And so with that in mind, the context of this game really is the clear historical viewpoint in the late 70s was the US and NATO were in a horrible situation. And hang on one second, I gotta get rid of a message there. Okay, we're in a horrible situation, and if the Soviets chose to attack in the late 70s, it was probably the best time for them to have attacked. The A1 wasn't available, the A10 wasn't available, the threat of nuclear arms being used and chemicals being used was fairly high. There was a misappreciation or misunderstanding of the capabilities of the Soviet forces and of their tanks and all the rest of it. They were deemed to be a lot stronger than they actually were. The category B and C divisions were kind of uprated, I guess, by US intel. So with all that in mind, this game is representing a lot of that, and it seems to be a very powerful example of taking the perceived history at the time and putting a game in place and potentially making it almost unwinnable for NATO. I don't know, I've never seen any stats on who wins the most or not, but I will share some stats from, if I can find them here, actually here somewhere, in terms of what's available to both sides and how that is kind of driving my thinking about which scenario to play. So bear with me for a second while I find where did I put that article? It's not this. I have it right here. Here we go. All right, this would be good to have a look at. Make some room. Okay, so when we look at the combat capabilities, and this is all from an article in a Moves magazine or a Fire and Movement magazine, the combat strengths by division for NATO. I'm going to show you the chart, and then I'll just talk you through it, and hopefully you'll be able to follow along with me. So you can see USSR combat factors at the beginning and at the end, and you can see NATO at the beginning and at the end on this this row here. And so if we look at that and go, okay, let's dig into that a little bit. At the beginning of the scenario, one of the spring maneuvers and kind of a surprise scenario. Spring maneuvers, the surprise scenario, you have 519 attack factors, or with the spring scenario, 730 attack factors available to you from the entire Warsaw Pact. That would contrast against the defensive capability of NATO of 474 in both cases. So a one-to-one ratio for the surprise attack scenario and the spring maneuvers attack. It's almost a 2-to-1 ratio, but not quite. As the game progresses, if the Soviets, say, chose the tension scenario and allow themselves to build up for the first half of the game, maybe for 15 turns, they would have 1,194 attack factors. And the NATO forces would also be able to build up, and they would have defensive value of 727, which is almost a 2-to-1 ratio again. But where it starts to get interesting is that by the end of the game, there's 1,500 attack factors for the Warsaw Pact and only 768. So obviously excludes losses and all the rest of it for NATO, which is going to be right on a 2-to-1 advantage in numerical strength. So I found that interesting. It's almost like the longer you wait, the less chance you have of being successful as NATO. Warsaw Pact air analysis. There's a total count of values broken down by air superiority value, interception value, and then their ground strike capability. And here there's a disparate difference. 1,875 air superiority points versus 435 for NATO, 770 for interception and 596 for NATO there. And NATO has an advantage in the ground attack capability, which is one of the reasons why you'll probably see NATO do a lot of interdiction of supply lines. So that really struck me, and that's without reinforcements. There's another table with reinforcements that those numbers just get worse for NATO. So the air game seems to be very seems to be skewed towards the Soviets just on a raw numbers basis. So I'm not sure how that's going to play out. Right. With all that in mind, I was thinking, it probably makes sense then to play the surprise scenario, the one where basically we're rolling out of the barracks, there's a 12-hour notification period. And that way, if we play it 1 or 2 turns, then we'll kind of get a feel for things and we can kind of have at it from there. I just realized the screen is blurred. Fabulous. We can kind of have at it from there. And if we did make some mistakes, then it'd be a faster reset than going through the two other scenarios will require a little more work in terms of setup. Let me get my water. Okay. All right. So let's see. I'm still in two minds. I was just reading a couple of comments from guys who've played a fair bit that the tension scenario is the only way to go for NATO and the only chance that NATO has. I find that unusual just based on what I'm seeing, but I guess that could well be the case. Let's have a look at the map too. So before we get started on the rules system, very different from the Third World War. Much more open ground to play with. The divisions are spread out. A lot of these units are air defense systems, fixed air defense systems even, as well as mobile air defense systems here and there. These are mechanized divisions. This is Heinz, and then we've got commandos here in MI6s, and each one of these is an army group. I'm going to try and keep the army groups together. I do the best I can to do that. There's no benefit to that necessarily, but it will aid us with managing supply. And I think in previous videos I've shown you that supply is critical, and it's going to be a factor when it comes to blowing bridges and maintaining connections over major rivers. We have to have a bridge connection to stay in supply as the Soviets. So there's some factoring of that to go into the equation. And what else was I going to mention? Compared to Third World War, I feel like because it was set in the 80s, this is NATO is pretty thin on the ground and not able to rebuild units as fast as perhaps they were able in 85, based on Frank Chadwick's view of the world anyway. So the other interesting factor when we look into this game and we play with a bunch of the optional rules is the air coverage nets, the AA and flak coverage. These guys here have a range of 3. I'll zoom in there, right? They have a range of 3 on their air AA. And if you look around, these guys fixed D's and C's have 1s. There's a D there. He has a range of 1, 1, 2, 3. There might be some stuff in here. Nope. So you're going to have to, you have the potential to weave your way through the flak and SAM umbrella on both sides. There's an equivalent on the other side. A lot of the air is set back. The air defenses are set back in the NATO forces side. Let me put some more white on here. You can see these units that have a green disc underneath them, they will have a range of 8. And it does build up quite a nice net across the front here. And in order for the Soviets to dig deep, the Warsaw Pact forces to dig deep and get that far in, you're going to have to neutralize 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So they're covering a pretty broad arc of these forces here, protecting the front line as it is. And that's going to be tough to work out how to suppress that flak and AA and air-to-ground, ground-to-air defense network, and then penetrate, isolate, and force capitulation or surrender. There are some surrender rules for Denmark, Belgium, and the Netherlands. They're pretty soft. I can read them to you if that's of interest. It might be interesting to see what they are. Again, I read them a week or 2 ago. But they do capitulate pretty easily, but on the same token, the Soviets are going to have to roll for Hungary, for revolts. Czechoslovakia and Poland and East Germany are all going to have to go through their rolls to make sure that they fully participate in the war. Let's see what the Danes. The Danes are, I think, the most likely to quit the quickest. Oh, 2 chances in 6 of surrendering when Soviet units enter Danish territory. Then once cities start to fall and things are in supply in certain areas near Zealand and whatnot, then it's a 1 through 3 they surrender. And then once Warsaw Pact forces enter Copenhagen, or Copenhagen as it's written here, 1 through 5 they'll surrender. So they're going to fall relatively quickly if that's a focal point. Excuse me, didn't mean to yawn there. Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg have very similar restrictions. Mere entry is, on a 1 they'll surrender. 2 through 6 they won't for the Belgians, and then as forces fall, Liege, etc., then the capitulation comes fairly quickly. So that is going to pose challenges for both sides. As I mentioned, there's an almost equal level of risk for the Czechs or the Poles to not participate. They may just stay inside their borders and be on the map. They certainly don't withdraw from the war entirely, I don't believe. All right, so there's all of that good stuff. I'm still thinking I might try the surprise scenario, and we'll kind of see how we go from there. So I want to share that with you. I think what we'll do from here is I might just do privately record a rules overview, and we'll focus in on movement and combat and the supply mechanic, and everything else we'll kind of just leave to be discussed as we play. Not sure how this is going to play live. Because this may take quite a bit of planning up front, and I may do some of that off camera. And I'm not necessarily going to live cast the whole thing, because it might be hundreds of hours of stuff for all I know if things get out of hand. Okay, hopefully this filming has oriented itself the correct way this time. And and you guys will be able to see the map and at least listen along, and we'll talk to